Hello, my delicious co-creators. Lilou here on magnificent in Marseille, south of France, with Dr. Eben Alexander. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Amazing. And I'm thrilled, my beautiful co-creators, to have this conversation with you and to be able to share such a level of information, of consciousness. This is really, I would say, a big deal. I don't, because I just read your book. I was absolutely blown away by the quality of your sharing and the experience and everything that you're going to hear right now from you. This, actually the title is you're a neuroscientist. Mm-hmm. You have been a professor in some of the most prestigious universities in the US. You have operated thousands, I guess, of brains, more than hundreds and hundreds. And you had this near-death experience. And you came back. You're now back from it after 7 days in coma. I want to hear all about it. First of all, I heard how much of a success this book is in the US. So we're excited to have you in France. It's becoming a success. It just came out in France. So we're thrilled to have you. I mean, I'm thrilled because I kept on seeing all those interviews, and to be sitting with you today and to have the privilege to spend the next 45 minutes with you and to go in deep details about this love that you felt, about this unity, all of it that actually you were quite skeptic about before. Right. So tell us about this success.
Well, to me, after I understood my journey, because initially, as with anyone who has a near-death experience, I was absolutely astonished at the power of it. And yet, of course, my doctors told me, oh, you were very sick. We didn't expect you to survive. You were so sick that your brain was completely wrecked. So you can forget about all those memories. And so at that time, I actually had such amnesia for everything I'd known in my previous life that I bought what they said completely and said, okay, well, it was too real to be real, but I guess maybe there's some clue about consciousness deep inside about that. So initially, I was very skeptical that it could have been anything other than a brain process. And so I sought to explain it as a brain-based phenomenon and was going to write this up as a paper for neuroscientists to help understand that hyper-reality that it can occur deep in a coma state and a near-death experience. And I thought especially in the setting of severe bacterial meningitis that before this illness, I would have told you, leaves no room for any kind of significant experience or memory of experience. And yet I came back with this odyssey, this very rich odyssey fresh in my mind. Yeah. So I had to explain that.
I really want to get into this. I was going to ask you, is it a phantasm or is it real? Clearly, you lived this as something very real, very rich, amazing, that you keep on sharing with people. So I really want to see more how, from the perspective of a doctor before, you would have these type of patients. What would you have told them? And what is, in your case, actually not possible you can't validate those things that you were actually telling your patients.
Right. Well, before this experience, I had heard a little bit about near-death experiences and such types of journeys, and I was a very conventional brain scientist and believe very much in reductive materialist science, which is if we understand everything there is to know about electrons, protons, neutrons, quarks, photons, their interactions, about physics, chemistry, biology, then in knowing the anatomy and physiology of the human brain, we will naturally come to conclusions about how the brain creates consciousness. And even though we really were not even remotely knowing of the first sentence in that explanation, I had faith before my coma that someday we would discover that. In other words, that the brain creates consciousness and there's nothing more to it. And that, I think, is one of the real beauties of my journey, is that what I finally came to realize after several months of trying to get to the bottom of explaining my journey as a brain-based phenomenon in a very sick brain, mainly thanks to the fact that I had severe bacterial meningitis. It was so severe, it drove me into coma in the first 3 or 4 hours. And in and of itself, the fact of being driven into coma within 3 or 4 hours and having severe bacterial meningitis gave me about a 10% chance of surviving at the beginning. And given that I did not respond to antibiotics for a while and that my neurologic condition was so dismal, even at the start, I started with only the most minimal of cortical function when I got to the emergency room, and then very quickly lost that. My brain stem was badly damaged even on that first day. My extraocular movements, the movements of the eyes, were very pathologic. In fact, I had no eye movements after a brief spell. Pupillary responses, all those things were gone. So it was a very severe meningoencephalitis with brainstem damage. And to be in a coma from that kind of an illness for 7 days, I mean, the general rule, doctors who take care of such patients will tell you, usually going into coma that quickly, by day 2 or 3, they're either waking up or they're dead. And there's no real middle ground. And so it was kind of unusual to be there on day 6, and I was, they lightened away all the sedation and everything, and there was no significant neurologic function there. And they were at a point of discussing withdrawal of antibiotics because they thought, well, there's no hope for any kind of recovery. By that 6th day, I was down to about a 2 or 3% chance of survival, but no chance of neurologic recovery, nothing significant. And they were basically predicting that at best, I would spend 3 months in the hospital and then the rest of my life in a nursing home requiring chronic care because I would be in a persistent vegetative state, unable to take care of myself. And so when I then started to wake up on day 7, it was a tremendous shock to those taking care of me and to my family and everyone else. And it was not that smooth because I spent the better part of the next 2 days kind of in and out of being conversant, although a little bit crazy, and then having this paranoid, delusional, psychotic event that was very brain-based. It had lots of language in it, as opposed to the incredible rich odyssey I had deep in coma, which certain clues showed me had to happen between days 1 and 5 of my coma, and not on day 7 when I actually started to wake up. But the vast majority of the coma experience happened deep in coma when my neurologic exam showed there was no way to have anything more than the most primitive and rudimentary of experiences, and yet I had this incredible hyper-real odyssey.
And little by little, you're starting to converse with your family and the doctors, and you wanted to start to share this experience, and the paranoia had gone. And what do you usually say to a patient that tells you about their near-death experience?
Well, before my coma, I would have just reassured them that they were very sick and that, when the brain is that sick, it does all kinds of crazy things, that it's a dream or hallucination, and that they can just forget about it, go on with their life. And that's what I would have said before coma. And that's why it's so crucial. Probably the most important factor in my story is that I had a very severe gram-negative bacterial meningitis that drove me into coma within hours, and then completely ravaged my neurologic exam to where I had no function of the neocortex. The neocortex is the outer surface of the brain. That's really the part that makes us human. All of our conscious experience, being here with you now, seeing you, hearing the ocean, just appreciating every bit of our being here, my body awareness, and the language that we use, and our understanding, rational thinking, our flow of logical thought, matching all of this against our memories of past experience and trying to make sense of it and modeling the world. All of that depends on the neocortex. All of that depends on the outer surface of the brain. There are other parts of the brain down in the thalamus, which is way down deep in the brain, and then way down in the lower part of the brain, the medulla and what's called the reticular activating formation. That's an ignition system, but the actual rich, elaborate tapestry that each one of us puts together as our model of the world around us, moment to moment, demands that at least some of that neocortex be there, because that's the most powerful calculator in the brain. And you cannot put together an elaborate, complex model of reality in consciousness without having at least some of the cortex working. That's why severe bacterial meningitis over 7 days was just such a powerful argument that this very real experience, more real than even sitting here with you, was something that truly occurred. And it took me months to understand this. But because of such a severe meningitis and the richness of my experience, which was fully formed even when I was waking up, I knew the full extent of where I'd been. And then I wrote all that down in the first few weeks after I came out. And my older son was wise enough to tell me, he was majoring in neuroscience, Eben the Fourth, and he was wise enough to tell me at the very beginning when I was 2 days out of the hospital, don't read anyone else's near-death experience. Don't read any physics, any cosmology. Write down everything you can remember from your own journey. It took me about 6 weeks. I wrote 20,000 words. And during those 6 weeks is when all my family memories, language and family memories, then memories of my education, of physics, chemistry, everything I knew about consciousness, brain, and mind, and all that neuroscience, neurosurgery knowledge, all that came out in layered fashion over those 6 weeks. And especially towards the end, as I had gotten to my medical records, reviewing my scans, realizing, wait a minute, the exams on this patient, the lab results with, for instance, the sugar level in the fluid around my brain spinal cord, normally 60 to 80. In severe bacterial meningitis, that sugar level, glucose, would go to 20. In my case, it went down to 1. And with all the diffuse damage showing up on the scans, showing that my entire neocortex was affected, I came to realize, no, this could not have happened in this brain. This patient was far too sick to have any kind of experience like that. In fact, I would bet they would have no experience, and certainly not remember any experience.
It's a miracle.
My doctors will tell you to this day that it is very much a medical miracle, something they cannot explain. There's no medical explanation for my full, complete, and rapid, over 3 months, recovery of my mental function to even something that's, I think, better than what I had before.
I love the quote of Albert Einstein, either you live a life that is you only see miracles, or nothing is a miracle.
Well, that is very much the way I see things now. And of course, I came to realize through this journey and coming back that every breath that we share is an absolute divine miracle. Every single one. And I should have known that before, but I guess I needed a thumping for me to really get it, but to realize the miraculous nature of our existence. In fact, my younger sister, who came in minutes after I woke up from coma, when I was sitting there looking at each person in the room, doctors, nurses, family, with this very deep look of admiring the sheer beauty and astonishing nature of the miracle that we share in every instant of our lives, and especially together as beings that get to share in this beautiful existence that we have, that every bit of that is a miracle. And that is the way that I now live my life. It's a beautiful gift from this journey.
I want to go deeper and deeper in this journey. Before I have this question about what is the perception that you have about consciousness? What is the nature of reality? How do you see this reality now? Are we really, for sure, living this?
Well, I think to me, one thing that became very, very clear from my journey is that the thing that exists is consciousness. The thing that truly exists is that part of us that can question whether or not we think, that part of us that moment to moment is alive and present and aware. That is consciousness. Now, the little voice in my head, the little voice that I spent all those years educating to be a neurosurgeon, that little voice of rational scientific thought, that is not me. The consciousness in me observes that voice. Very important to realize that that little voice is not the consciousness. The consciousness is the aware part of us that sees that, hears that little voice, and is aware of our existence moment to moment. And that was a profound realization from my journey that, of course, I now use all the time when I do meditation. And for me, meditation is something I do 2 or 3 hours a day. And it's very much about getting in touch with my inner awareness. I might use that little voice in my head to make a request, state an intention on the way in, state gratitude, profound gratitude for this existence, but then that little voice must be quiet, because then I go into deeper and deeper meditation. And what we end up finding, and of course this is something that's been known for millennia by deep meditators, Tibetan monks, Buddhists, many who are very adept at getting deep into the fantastic mysteries of consciousness, which really are the root of all of existence in this universe. And that's the crucial thing to understand. So I came away realizing that consciousness indeed is the primary thing that is. And to cut to the chase, I would say that all of our consciousness at deeper levels becomes one consciousness. And we, in fact, through meditation, centering prayer, through a gift of desperation, there are many ways for us to get in touch with that oneness of consciousness that at its very core is one with the divine, with the infinitely powerful, infinitely knowing, deeply personal, and all-loving divine within each and every one of us. And that is through our own consciousness. And that's where the answers to all of this lie. So people can watch the DVDs, go to the courses, read the books. At the end of the day, the way to come to knowing this more deeply and know the truth of it is to go in our own consciousness. And that's why my current research is so involved with meditative tools to help people get into much deeper levels of conscious meditation.
In that moment where you went through those different levels in your near-death experience, in that moment where you felt that you understood and had this all-knowing, like all of a sudden, all the answers were there in not even a microsecond. This doesn't even apply, I guess. Wow, what a moment! Was that like a moment? How did that felt? That particular moment.
It's so interesting because one thing that was very clear to me in that journey, and I describe in my book a very simplistic realm that was kind of the initial realm, and that was my realm that did not involve any memory of my life. There were no words, I had no body image, and in the book I call that the earthworm eye view. And it was very kind of monotonous and sounds a bit foreboding when I discuss it, but when I was there, especially since I did not remember anything of my existence before, I simply accepted it for what it was.
It's very different than any other near-death experience.
It's different from some, but especially when you go back, you find that is often present in some of the deeper transcendental near-death experiences. And not only that, if you go back into the afterlife literature, going back hundreds and even thousands of years, you find that there's a certain consistency to that realm being there. In fact, I would say, many people asked me early on, well, was that earthworm eye view, was that hell or purgatory? And my initial response was no, it was really not very interactive at all. And it
was more like a muddy kind of place where you
murky, underground, like roots, or I literally remember roots or blood vessels that were kind of all around me, and I could sense way off into the distance, even though it was dark and foamy, and occasionally some almost animal-like face would kind of boil up out of it and then go away, kind of a dark side to it all. But
you were able to get out of it, and you were able to in an easier and faster way to get out of it, and to which is also, I love to make the parallel, with our regular life too, and the lessons and all that, because obviously we have our moments of despairs, of fears, of total anxieties,
yes.
But there is a way out to this light, to this very much this pure love.
That was one of the most beautiful gifts of this, was when I had been in that lowly realm for a long time, there was this lovely light, a clear, very clear white light that had a kind of a rough surface with these fine tendrils, white and gold, that were streaming off all around it. And it was slowly rotating as it came towards me. And probably one of the most beautiful aspects to it, aside from this lovely appearance, was the fact that it was associated with a perfect musical melody. And those notes so perfect. And this came after a very long time in that coarse realm where all I'd heard was a pounding monotonous, like someone smashing on an anvil, deep underground. And so this lovely melody associated with a spinning clear light was a beautiful gift. And it opened up like a hole in the fabric of that ugly reality. And it was a portal up into this lovely valley, a brilliant, verdant, very fertile, alive valley that was filled with lush greenery. And again, I had no body awareness in this realm, but I was moving up through it because I was a speck of awareness on this butterfly wing. Now, this was not any kind of butterfly you'd find on Earth. It's not one where some entomologist could give you genus and species. But that's the best earthly word I have for this conveyance. And it was moving up into this brilliant valley, up into very bright green. You could see all of this lush, fertile growth going on even as we flew by. And there would be flowers and buds on trees that would open up. And I can remember the perfect, intricate, amazing texture of these very alive flowers and buds that were so clearly fertile and filled with life that they would just open up and unfold and reveal this incredible beauty, even as we were flying by. And so all that was going on. And beside me, on the butterfly wing, a beautiful girl, absolutely perfect and so lovely. And I could remember her face so well. These high cheekbones, broad smile, high forehead, light brown hair, sparkling blue eyes, and just this deep look of pure love. And it was so intense and beautiful. She never said a word, but her thoughts, and these were not as words, but as concepts. When I wrote this up weeks later, I would write the words, but the concepts very clear. You are loved and cherished dearly forever. You have nothing to fear. There's nothing you can do wrong in this realm. In that spiritual realm, I had nothing I had to worry about. There was nothing I had to get right. That I was deeply loved and cherished and would be cared for and nurtured. And just the love, the pure bliss that came with this love from her, a love so far beyond the love that we feel on earth, whether it's romantic love or it's parental love or filial love, the general love for all of humanity, all of life. All of those loves are in the right direction. But this love that she showed me, purely without conditions, was the purest form and transcended all of the others. And I cannot put into words, I mean, just to even talk about it now just gives me just these shivers of bliss because it was so powerful and so complete. And in that same setting, I saw these souls dancing below us. I, in my early writing, said they were appeared as peasants, but there was so much happiness and joy and this simplicity in their love, and lots of children playing and dogs jumping, and it was just a beautiful, wonderful, perfectly mirthful existence. And then above us in the sky, these billowing clouds of color against this blue-black deep sky in the background. And then beyond those clouds, these orbs, these brilliant light orbs of spirit beings that were leaving these dazzling trails of golden dust, sparkling. And they were swooping in these formations, and all of that, of the memory of these beautiful arcs, these orbs of light, such pure beings, were sending down wave after wave of these anthems, chants, angelic choirs, hymns, crescendo after crescendo after crescendo, beyond any beautiful music I've ever heard on earth. It was moving to the soul and the heart and the spirit, pure emotional power, the bliss of that intensity of love that was just coming down. And in remembering it weeks later to write it up, it was so confusing, but it was clear that one doesn't see with the eyes and hear with the ears. And at times in this realm, you would become all of what was being shown to me, and I would feel the emotional intensity in other beings as part of the lessons that I was there to learn. And that was so true, especially in seeing those angels, as I call them in my writing, those orbs of light, these pure spiritual beings, were these highly ascended angels. And the music was such an incredible gift, and it was a means of actually moving into higher and higher dimensions in that realm, because immediately on recognizing the beauty of that music, this whole world began to collapse. And what I saw was that realm, and then all of this kind of, I was already in higher dimensional space beyond our four-dimensional space-time here, but that all collapsed down into this tiny little ball, and time itself, the way we see time in this universe, collapsed into a loop or a point. It was just snapped right down. And then there were higher dimensional causality that came into it, really the dwelling place of our souls, where our souls go through so much of the kind of higher soul, lower soul that has to do with our connection through the veil, our veil of not knowing that other side so clearly, but having to go on faith from this side. But on that other side, much more knowing, where we're united with our soul mates. And it has everything to do with our learning the lessons from this incarnation, allowing ascendance of our souls in that higher causality, in a time that is completely outside of Earth time, of this universe time, and a time that has complete access to any part of time here, which of course explains so much about near-death experiences, about seeing departed loved ones' souls, about after-death communications, past life experiences, reincarnation. There's a tremendous amount of scientific data that supports the reality of those things. When one takes the time to actually look at the data and realize, oh my gosh, this is real. There's something going on here. And then even to a higher realm, which I call the core, which was the home of that divine, that all-powerful, all-loving, infinitely pure source of the entire multiverse. And in that core realm, this awareness of infinity far beyond any infinity of these lower realms, infinite inky blackness, but also beside me this brilliant orb of light, of pure light. And there was a sense of the three of us, a very strong sense that there was this divine, all-powerful, all-loving, that is certainly in that realm nothing you could see at all. You sensed everywhere throughout that infinity and that eternity, and the orb of light. I even had the sense that the orb of light was like a translator or interpreter. And in my early writings, I thought the source of light was like my beautiful companion on the butterfly wing, who I came to call my guardian angel. And I'm not certain I can make that correlation, but I do know that there was a very strong sense of a triangle in that core realm, of that infinite, all-powerful, all-knowing, and fully creative God, the orb of light, and then my consciousness. But this consciousness was so far beyond an individual human consciousness. It was much more of a consciousness even grander than all of humans and life on Earth, but the far grander cosmic consciousness that we all share. And I was told that the part of me that was this observer, this awareness, this consciousness, was not there to stay. So in essence, that awareness, some part of it, would be coming back. That I was not there to stay, but in fact that part of me that still had this attachment all the way down to the Eben Alexander on this earth was to learn many things that they would teach me about love, and how love was the fabric of all the higher dimensions and even was dominant down in these low dimensions, how evil was there to serve as basically a trace impurity that allowed for the manifestation of our free will in this realm. And that is the biggest gift of that all-loving God for us, is loving us so dearly, but still to allow us to have choice and to make choices in this world, to have free will, and that was a huge part of it. And understanding so much more about the physical makeup of space-time consciousness in both, down in this lower dimensional, but also seeing it from that higher dimensional realm of our spirit existence, and how all of that spirit is one at the deepest levels, and of course at the very center becomes one with the divine. But there was so much to all of those lessons, and even about physical makeup of it all.
And it's interesting you haven't mentioned the word Om, and I posted this question on Facebook to tell people I was interviewing you, and a lot of questions came up, and one of them was Dr. Alexander used to use the word Om, and now for God. Really, tell us about this. And now you're more using the word God. Why so? Well, because it felt for them and for us that it's beyond the religion and it's another realm.
I think it's important to understand that our language, our words, are very limiting. No matter what those words are, they are limiting. They divide, they try to define things and try and provide a false separation. Of course, it's useful in this realm. Down here in this dualistic realm, our language does serve a function. But coming from that highest realm, it was clear, for one thing, that all-powerful deity, really at the core of all of existence and all eternity, and the source of infinite, unbounded, indescribable love, was beyond any words. To use any word at all fails miserably. And in fact, for the first several months, I would say, I hesitated to use the word God, because to me, at that point, the memories were so fresh and clear of this infinite awe and power of that being, and also the infinitely loving nature of that being for all of creation, and each element of creation was just far too much to try and use the word God. However, in our earthly understanding, that is absolutely that being. And I realize that others who have come back over thousands of years to tell tales of journeying to this very real realm. It's the reality that underlies our material world reality that is actually not anywhere near as real as it seems. But that very real world, ultra-real realm, which I liken to Plato's world of forms, is kind of the real basis on which this kind of imperfect world is modeled. And Om was the sound that I remembered in that in what I call the core, and that infinite inky blackness filled to dazzling with this brilliant light of an orb that was serving as kind of a translator for all these lessons. The sound I recalled there associated with that all-loving being was Om, but it was an Om that was eternal, that was an infinite resonance in all of eternity. And of course, any of the physics people out there trying to get at the word resonance will say, wait a minute, how can you have a resonance when we're talking about all of eternity, higher dimensional space and time, far beyond our little four-dimensional space-time? How can there be a resonance there? Well, there is when it's with all of eternity. And that was the sound I heard, was this very deep and perfect Om. And for me, that was what I called that all-loving, all-powerful source of infinite love and all of the energy for all of existence. Om was the best descriptor I could put onto it. And also I must say I use that. People sometimes ask about that all-powerful deity, whether it is a male or female. And of course I am quick to point out that, of course, it is such a being of perfection that it is that perfect blend of all dualities, including male and female. So there is no gender associated. And so, but I would use Om as a pronoun in a sense, because that way I did not have to use he or she or it in reference to that all-powerful deity. But Om was, for me, a perfect descriptor of that power. And for me, it had no previous labeling that that took away from it.
Do you feel now that you are that divine, and the divine is there, and it's in all of us, that we are like mini gods on this earth? How do you feel about this relationship? Is that not even a relationship now, since it's a unity?
It's I've come to see that consciousness, and which I defined earlier and said that's really in the simplest sense, it is that little spark in each one of us that allows us to have a self, a presence. It's that consciousness that can wonder whether or not I think, and therefore I am, to kind of paraphrase but extend Descartes a little bit. It is that little spark within us that actually is an eternal spark. It is not created by the brain at all. It actually is a very direct link to eternal soul, spirit consciousness that at deeper levels connects all of us. And it connects us even moment to moment in these incarnations, and connects us in grander fashion as our souls ascend in that outer realm, and the causality of that higher realm. And that ascendance is all due to manifesting that beautiful unconditional love, showing compassion and forgiveness. That is the coin of that realm, is pure love. And the more we manifest that here, the more we allow for our soul's ascendance in that higher causality, in that higher realm. But of course, that same connection goes all the way to its center, which is that infinitely powerful and infinitely knowing, deeply personal, and all-loving God, which is at the core of each and every one of us through our very consciousness. And that is why I tell people you don't have to almost die to get this. This is a knowing within each and every one of us by being conscious beings. And that's why through deep meditation, centering prayer, gift of desperation, whatever the means that gets us to become aware of that we can come to know this truth in our own being and become very much the divine, eternal, spiritual beings that we truly are. But it's by getting deep into that and getting well away from the kind of illusion of the material realm, and that includes the kind of self, ego, things that are very much tied to the linguistic brain, although they don't demand it, because animals also have such structures that kind of help them. But they also are much more telepathic than we are. They're much more naturally into that kind of consciousness that we all share. Our linguistic brain actually gets in the way. And certainly our kind of worship of materialistic world, which grew so strongly in the 20th century.
Possession, buying, and getting more and more.
Well, not so much that as much as believing that this material world out here, the time and space, protons, neutrons, photons, that world, and our belief in the reality of that is the only reality, is so false. And it leads us away from the deeper truth, which is the thing that exists, is that awareness in me, in you, of the fact that we are a truly
a miracle.
We are a miracle. We are an existing, we can question, our very, we're aware. And just by being able to question whether or not we exist, basically is the most profound statement of our existence, and realizing that that is the thing that truly is. And that is a part that is independent. It's not created by the brain. When that little voice in my head is very active, that's created by the brain, but it's the conscious me within that is witness to that little voice. And that, the witness, is the thing that truly exists, and in fact is liberated to a much higher level of knowing when freed up from the brain and body. And that's what happens when our bodies die. So we actually get this wonderful surprise that we are so much grander, eternal spiritual beings. And also the surprise of seeing our connectedness with our loved ones in a much richer fashion, that it is not limited to the little birth to death interval that I used to just think, well, that's all there is to it. So, you might have wishful thinking, but it doesn't affect reality. I now realize that essence of us that is within that conscious awareness of self actually becomes much grander when freed up from the body and brain. And then, in fact, we can come to see that ourselves even in this incarnation through deep meditation, centering prayer, various modalities, putting in the work to get into our consciousness and to acknowledge but quiet that little voice that is not truly us, and to go much deeper and find that there is a richness of existence that is eternal, and that is truly who we are. And, of course, it's connected directly to the divine.
Could we say that this is a scientific discovery, or at least the biggest discovery that you'll have ever found for yourself? What an experience.
I would say...
What a change.
It changed everything about my life. It changed everything about the way I see things. And now, all of my knowing is much more of a synthesis. It makes much more sense. And things that used to be very mysterious, and certainly in my readings after coma, I went deep into the mystery of what's called the hard problem of consciousness, which is basically that those who study deeply into mind, brain, consciousness, what is it, have come to realize, as opposed to getting closer to writing a big textbook that explains the mechanism of consciousness, they've actually, in the last few decades, gotten much closer to realizing that mystery is so deep that, in fact, there is no way anyone on earth will ever come out with some materialistic explanation of how the brain creates consciousness, because it doesn't. The brain is a reducing valve or filter that actually takes the pre-existing, universal consciousness that at its one core is the divine, is God, and parcels it down into a very limited form that works in us, in the kind of localized here and now, in this illusion. It very much serves a purpose, for those out there who want to trumpet, Darwinian evolution and natural selection, certainly bringing that consciousness down to a level that's limited to a here and now in a physical being serves a wonderful purpose to help towards its survival in the realm, especially over millions of years of looking at all of the threats to survival and the needs for survival. But in fact, luckily, we've kind of transcended some of that that survival of the fittest necessity, and now are free to get much more deeply into our consciousness as it expands into a universal consciousness. And that's why meditation, centering prayer, near-death experiences are a beautiful window that take many, many millions of people over the last 50 years into that realm, and then allows them to come back without as completely covering up their memories and experience as happens naturally when babies' souls come into this world, because they go through a natural process, having been freshly from that realm of the divine, of kind of layering it over to where it's not obvious, and they kind of layer it over with the illusion of reality of this material realm, but leaving it that they really have to have some kind of faith or deep memory, soul memory, of the reality of that divine at the core of all of us.
Magnificent. I have, and I know you have, a whole bunch of other questions for you, and I know that you're going now to speak and to meet with the French TV, and we're very, very excited to have you here. And of course, this conversation could go on for hours. It's such a blessing to receive that, and I feel that just by you opening up and having the courage to be yourself and share this, it impacts others with your experience. Of course, I recommend that you read the book. It's a must. I was so caught in it. I lived it. Thank you for doing such a good job at explaining. And I know the seed is still growing. The seed of light is still growing, and you will understand more, and you're writing more books, huh?
Yeah, I am. I mean, in fact, the manuscript for Proof of Heaven was more than 3 times as long as the current book. And that's because I was writing it to understand it myself. I had to come to something that included everything I know about quantum mechanics, about the quantum enigma, everything I know about consciousness and the hard problem of consciousness, everything I know about the physics of reality, had to come together and make sense in light of everything that I witnessed on my journey. And now with ongoing efforts to uncover more of that through deep meditation, although the core of the journey is something that I knew when I first came back, and that's what I wrote down in those first 20,000 words. So yes, I am working on another book that will bring a lot more of this into the fore. Important to say that this book, once I realized what was going on and what the message was, it was very clear that this book should be for the general reader. And so that's why I had to strip out a lot of the other things that were necessary for my understanding, because they get right down at the very core of the nature of consciousness, space, time, mass, energy, the very geometry of higher dimensional space. There were things in there that were not necessary for getting the message out to people, but important to stress that I'm every bit as much a scientist as I've ever been. And this is all about science, but with a capital S, a science that gets towards knowing the truths of our existence. And there are certain aspects of the scientific method that can help get there, but the scientific method by its very design is extremely limited. And can only reveal a small facet of overall reality. Important to stress that all that wonderful, successful science of the 20th century, science and technology, in fact, was so primitive and simplistic, it had absolutely nothing whatsoever to say about a mechanism for consciousness arising from the physical brain. And that's a tremendous red flag that completely dismantles the materialistic view of the world with its kindergarten-level thinking that explains all that matters, because it doesn't have the first sentence to tell us anything about consciousness. And so people who want to learn more about this can go to my website, lifebeyonddeath.net, which I highly recommend for starters. In addition, I started Eternia, ETERNEA.org, which is all about trying to educate the public about consciousness, about the physics related to consciousness, about spiritually transformative experiences of all manner, not just near-death experiences, but there are many, many other types, and these are all defined in great detail on eternia.org. And also, that is a place where people can tell their own stories. We have a database set up to receive stories from everybody on this planet, because I guarantee you there are hundreds of millions, if not billions, of stories out there about the reality of the spiritual realm. And it's by taking the lid off and letting people share their stories. And we've constructed the databases very specifically for all the different categories. So they'll be useful for researchers, for physicists, for philosophers of mind, for doctors, nurses, clergy, all those who study and want to learn more about this realm. And through Eternia.org, that's the engine to help take us all to that level. Eternia will also be supporting research, scientific research that helps to prove the existence of this realm in a very strong fashion.
So my beautiful co-creators, you know what you have to do now. Do a little video, right? The webcam through the webcam, and boom, even the iPhone, and upload it on that site and share with your own spiritual experience. I know that so many of you around the world, because this is really around the world here. I love the internet. You know,
yes,
we're reaching...
Exactly. It frees up all of us. Individual souls are given such freedom through the internet. It's such a gift, and that's why we're here to share these things and to tell the world. And this is about all of us being together, because my journey is also one that is about tearing down the boundaries between various religions, because this is all about love, compassion, forgiveness, taking care of each other, because we're all beloved souls. And we are really all one in the deepest core, and that is one with the divine. And it's also about taking down boundaries between religion and science, because those are artificial. And also letting spirituality in its fullest sense blossom fully with religions and with science, because this is all about science becoming much grander in taking us to the deepest truths about the nature of our existence. And part of that is fully acknowledging the infinite loving nature of our one soul spirit that we all share, the essence of our being, that fully transcends any material view of birth to death, and is all about the relationships that we share with each other and with all of life throughout the universe.
Throughout the universe, you are love. You are pure love. We love you so much, and we send you lots of beautiful, loving, magnificent, delightful, loving energy from south of France, from Marseille.
Yes, from a beautiful, beautiful, I love the ocean crashing waves outside. This is absolutely, and you're all here. We're all together in this, and it's absolutely beautiful.
Thank you for sharing this video, guys. Facebook, everywhere. Let's share it. This is really a powerful, I would say it's the most powerful interview I've done. So I thank you for sharing it now and helping it expand and grow throughout the world. Thank you so much, Eben.
Thank you so very much for having me. I appreciate it very much.
You're a delight, off, on camera, all of it. I love it. I enjoyed. I can't get enough. Much love. I can't get enough of you too. Bye.